In December of last year, the federal government released an AI plan, which, you know, we'll get into the details of it. Some people weren't happy with how far it went. Other people accused us of being vague, but at least we had a plan. We didn't have a plan prior to that. At least at the same time or in preparation for the development of that plan, the Business Council of Australia, which is basically it's it's just a union for businesses. It's a union for employers, a union for businesses, because, you know, unionism amongst workers has become such a dirty word. Why don't we just call it workers' councils? Because it's the exact same thing. So the union for businesses that represents businesses and advocates to government, the Business Council of Australia, that represents the CEOs of the largest employers in this country. The board includes the managing director of Google Australia, Mel Silver, data center providers, executives from several major technology and AI companies like Meta and Amazon. And it had previously pushed for copyright reform in its submission to the government's national AI plan. So that's what the Business Council of Australia is. They represent the interests of the biggest businesses in the country, as they have a right to do. Crikey, this all comes via some really good reporting from Cam Wilson at Crikey. They got access to a draft proposal. Now, the eventual proposal didn't reflect this, but the draft proposal was telling, I think, that was going to be submitted to the government, dated December last year. They were suggesting, the Business Council of Australia was suggesting that the government amend the Copyright Act. So remember we were saying we went through this kind of period at the end of last year where, they're suggesting we are able to mine and make an exception for copyrighted materials. The government went, no, we're shutting the door on that. A few months later, the Business Council of Australia comes with a proposal suggesting amendment of the Copyright Act to introduce a new legal concept called non-expressive use, rather than introducing a compulsory licensing scheme for using works to train AI, or other alternatives which the government were considering at the time and still are. Now, to explain that, under current copyright law, a work's, quote, expression, which means the specific way an idea is written, composed, or depicted, is what is protected, not the underlying facts or ideas themselves. So the way that Cam Wilson explained this well was for the article that we're drawing from in this. He said, reproducing this article is prohibited under Australian copyright law, but writing a derivative article about the Business Council of Australia's draft submission using only the facts from that isn't. So if you know, you can't take the expression of it, well, that's a bad way to phrase it. You can't take the creative, the very specific tenets that made it a creative work from that individual, but you can take the facts that underlie it, the nuts and bolts parts. The BCA, the Business Council of Australia, said that training an AI on copyrighted work to extract patterns, statistics, and facts may technically infringe copyright and cannot reliably be covered by existing exceptions in copyright law in Australia. So they instead propose an amendment to enshrine non-expressive use for, quote, computational analysis as lawful and outside of the copyright system. This is a lot of like mumbo jumbo.
I hope you're sticking with it.
But like the main thing, they're effectively just suggesting the exception that the door was shut on sooner. They're just kind of changing the way that it was proposed. And that's what we're getting to with this story. So you don't have to understand the nuts and bolts completely. They're basically were suggesting in this proposal that we create a new definition for the type of data that AI models would like to extract from copyrighted works and say that's all good, which is essentially the exception that was being proposed before that got shut down by the government.
To put it in music terms, and this analogy could be way off, and you would disagree, let me know, but basically the way I'm looking at that is going, well, sure, this song is copyright protected, but if I just say, I'm just looking at the data, I'm just looking at the beats per minute and what chord progression that they had, like that's all data. That's not, the meaning behind the song or the artist's expression or their interpretation or, the background to it. That's just the raw data that's come out of the song. That's up for grabs, surely. That's how I'm interpreting what they're trying to differentiate between, which currently is protected under Australian copyright law.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. So maybe, you're not making a like-for-like copy of the artist's voice, the lead singer, for example. But those underpinning data that construct the song, they're saying we should be able to study that, which is effectively what they wanted to do prior. But a lot of the training of these models involves recreation of the piece of art themselves. And irrespective of all of that, you're still using something that somebody has created, whether you're using the data from that or you're using it like for like. You're still using it to make profits for yourself, which was what the argument came down to. Why should artists be giving away their work to these multi-billion, $500 billion companies to train their models on, to then generate a profit themselves without those artists actually ever seeing $1 for it? And that's what this whole argument comes down to.